Work-life balance is so hard in LA, nearly impossible. But I feel like with most jobs that work-life balance is in ink, and with jobs that are creative and storytelling based, it's in pencil. So even when you're overwhelmed with work, there is some joy in it. And even when you're overwhelmed with life, your work is affecting it. And I think that's the only way to have a work-life balance in a creative field. So I think I ended up in this position because I kind of like let go of the idea of clocking out. And sometimes that breaks me, and burnout happens to me way more often than I feel is healthy. But I'm also net happier more often than I think the average person. So like my extremes are still extreme. I'm either ecstatic or I'm in a corner like, oh, what have I done? Why is everything a hobby, my work? I don't think I could have chosen a job that I left. And I think that was a problem with jobs, was I would leave them and be like, why did I waste those 6 hours? If I'm serving tables, I'm experiencing like conversation, but like I'm not getting the benefit of this company doing better. They're making all this money and I'm not. So I think from a really young age, I was trying to find the thing that was gonna make me my own boss, my own employee. And also when I look back on my legacy, I've caused something.
I think it's how you define being content. Hi, welcome to Making Impact. I'm here with Coy Jandreau, who is a co-host of Real Rejects.
Citizens of the Reject Nation, I am sitting down here making an impact, and I hope it makes an impact on you. I'm very excited to talk a lot in this episode. We're obviously going to talk comic books because that is what I am known for here, but also I get to talk about some stuff I'm not as known for. We're going to be breaking down what I think there is hope for with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, what I hope society gets from our current wave of a little bit of chaos, and a bit of my own superhero origin story into what got me into superhero stuff.
Thank you, Coy. It's great to see you again. I think last time I saw you was at our live event.
Yes.
It was wonderful and exciting, and there's some funny stories I think we're going to tell about that day, because that was completely an unscripted, fun day of wonderful things happening. But thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. So tell me a little bit. I noticed a lot of what you talked about on the panels was your connection to comic books, superheroes. Tell me a little bit more about what that meant for you. When did that start? Was that something you always did? And then how has that driven you to where you are today?
So in the beginning, I got my first comic when I was 2, my second birthday, and I have a picture of it because my parents thought it'd be cute to get me a Spider-Man 2 for my second birthday.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I have a Spider-Man 2, which was the Todd McFarlane. So it's the one that started in 1990. It was 1990 when I was 2. The Todd McFarlane run started in 1990, and it's actually this really aggressive run, which is so funny because I look back, I'm like, what did you guys give me? And like, it's a battered, ravaged Spider-Man, and it really immediately drew me into pictures pairing with words. And I think that's the beautiful nature about a comic book is if you can't read yet, you can interpret it. And then from there, you can correlate words to images. And from there, you can learn to read. So I learned to read through comic books at a super young age. And that really brought me into the world of storytelling. And the thing I think comics do best is they're kind of this beautiful agnostic equalizer of morals. And no matter what you believe in, there are these characters that are known to be fiction that bring us all together to shape our ethics and shape our morals, but without any of the vitriol of organized religion or any of the animosity of tribalism. There's this one beautiful thing that is being good. And the shades of gray get interpreted as you get older, but you get the idea of goodness right away. And I've always loved that this medium is for the poor or the rich. Comics were literally rags. They were thrown away. They were 12 cents, 12 cents meant more then, but you could do a lot with storytelling, and it was for the proletariat. This is a very approachable medium. And I've always loved that it was made in a way that was at times political, at times religious, at times controversial, at times for an R-rated audience, but the medium itself was always meant to be approachable. And so I think—
and accessible.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful medium that is the most of the people for the people that we have.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much. And is there, in particular, because I love the fascination with superheroes, and I'm kind of fascinated with, I believe all of us have inside of us the ability to have a dark side and have a light side, and then how either one of those manifest themselves within your life and your daily. Is there a way that you tie any of those superheroes or any story particularly that influenced you or that was one that you gravitated towards in your life?
I think it's interesting when you're a kid how much the bad guy calls to you. And I think there's a point when you have to realize that Superman is good because he's corny. And there is a
Right.
character that is, a little maybe not as redeemable or, what you should aspire to be like Batman. Batman's awesome. He's so cool. But he's a guy punching mentally ill. Like when you evolve the shades of gray through the good and evil, I think that's really cool about comic books is because you can kind of, depending on where you are in your life, relate more to one than the other, and that can evolve. I didn't understand Superman in my teens and 20s because it didn't make sense to me that someone would just be good for goodness sake. But as a kid,
Yes.
it's a guy in a cape. You don't have to overthink it. But then in your 30s, depending on where you are in your life, it kind of comes back. So good and evil being a relative term, honestly, that is another thing that I think comics does well, where you can read a book that the author's point of view is so firm in this character being good or bad. But comics, since they've spanned decades, different writers have their way with them, different characters evolve. So good and evil kind of morphs as the characters do and as you do. So it's this Ouroboros of art of shades of gray that really is special to me.
Well, I think you mentioned something that I find fascinating too. And I think when you're younger, the reason that perhaps you're aspiring to saying, I'm more interested in the bad guy, right? He has this is because there's a lack of overall freedom in decision making,
Yeah.
right? The lack of choice or the lack of the ability to be autonomous in your own existence, it ceased to exist when you're young. And then all of a sudden, you get to a certain age when you can make choices and do things and you have more autonomy and you don't need to strive for outside of the what's considered the law or the way to do it. I also think the thing I find interesting about comic books is you can almost feel the compassion for even some of the villains, the worst of villains. There's always a story to them where they got to where they got to.
Yeah.
And it makes you, at least for me, it made me always have empathy or compassion and say, oh God, I wish they would have I wish they weren't doing that. Like, it's not their fault that they got this way. I wish someone instead would be helping them instead of like villainizing them because they were abused or put in terrible situations. And now they have this need to control things.
I think that's the power of long form, right? Like it's serialized. So I think comics are pretty close to like oral tradition. They're pretty close to like sitting around the fire. How we started was literally drawings on cave paintings and telling stories. To me, that's comics. So I think the long form nature of it, the continued narrative of it allows for characters to not just be black and white villains. I mean, there are those, but they don't usually survive the test of time because they're so one note. And I also think there's a human element to it too, where comics are less cooks in the kitchen than the average other medium. With books, you've got editors. With movies, you've got directors, writers, actors, DP. There's so many people when you watch movie credits, and those are just people credited. There's so many people beyond that. So
Right.
comic books are more people than people realize. But at the end of the day, a writer and an artist are collaborating. You've also got inkers, you've also got editors and whatnot, certainly, but it's two people's vision for the most part. And I think you can find more compassion in individuals than you do when you muddy that through the people. And I think that's why mobs are dangerous. Like when you incite something and it spreads through people, it can be a really quick negative. But I think almost everyone is redeemable as an individual. And I think everyone has a little empathy and compassion. So when you've got mainly two people collaborating on a piece of art, their goodness is going to come through even in the bad. And I think that's special.
Oh, I do. I think it's really special. And I think it also lends itself. First, I love the idea that it is able, people are able to access it, right? They're able to have the ability to say, okay, I'm reading comics, I'm doing this. And every single thing you said about learning how to read, and I can say this from working in a bunch of schools and doing a lot of focus on literacy, that is actually what you learn to be a reading teacher, right? Is you learn to take context, clues, decipher words based on pictures, say a word you know, skip the word you don't, go to
Yeah.
the next thing, but you infer what that story tells you. And do you think that helped you with your own storytelling and creativity to be able to that young? Because I think it's funny, like you're 2 years old and you have this picture, but it's also a pretty aggressive thing, but you weren't shying away from it, right?
Yeah.
You didn't shy away from it and you looked and told yourself the story, I wonder the accuracy to what the words said to what the picture said.
It's funny because that particular comic, Spider-Man is beaten up and it's brutal and violent, and then there was a toy that came out that correlated, and it was a battle-ravaged Spider-Man, and I had never heard the word out loud, but I had seen it over and over again. So until I was like 7, I said ravaged. And it's the perfect example of not knowing what it means or how it's pronounced because you just have an association with the image. So I knew it meant beat up, but I thought it was ravaged. And it's funny, those little things of like context as you evolve with language. And I think my storytelling started so young because of the pictures, but then it drew me into literature. Like I was reading books without pictures much earlier than my friends because I wanted just like data and knowledge. And to this day, I was an actor and I liked it, but I like hosting more because it's more about every story and it's more of a butterfly effect. Like everything that happens in my life affects my interviews and my interviews affect my life. With acting, I found that when I was done with set, I didn't have the same consequence to it. So that was a huge part of storytelling to me. It was the realization that Spider-Man issue 2 tied into 3, tied into 4, tied into 5, and it was all one really long thing. And that was so important to me. So storytelling being cumulative, I think, was the biggest thing I got out of being a kid because I had no way to quantify that. Like
Right. Of
until
course
I'm
not. Yeah.
15, I probably didn't understand what it was doing to me. But
Right.
at that point, I'd been reading for 13 years. So like I had so much to play with of what like legacy is and all those things.
Well, I love also that it gave you the thirst and the passion to learn, right? It's intellectual curiosity. And I think that's something we're always trying to do when we think about impact. And I always say, yes, you can start with children, you can look at adults, there's different ways to do this, but there's a value in creating intellectual curiosity so that people become engaged, and especially children. You need various opportunities to try things, to understand, because you can't really dream of what you don't even know exists. How do you think reading books or storytelling helped shape where you sit today, right? I mean, you were an actor, you're saying all these things, and
Yeah.
you could have gone in any path you wanted to. And instead, you kind of stayed true to the thing you had your hands on since you were 2.
It's actually crazy to think about because it's the thing that I think with different parents I would have put down first. You know, that's the thing
Yes.
in high school. They're like, what are you doing reading comics? What a waste of time. My parents met in art school. They encouraged it from the beginning. My dad collected comics. So it was the thing that I loved most that I didn't turn into. I didn't have comic reading friends, but my first job was working at a comic store. Like, well, I was a paper boy first, but my first like consistent me job was helping my guy under the table at my comic shop. So it was always the thing that I kept going back to. So even when I left and like worked at a restaurant, I still drifted back to movies and comics. I worked at a movie theater from 14 to 20. It was always movies and comics. So I think the problem I had with other jobs was it wasn't something that affected my day-to-day life. And it wasn't something that I felt like that work-life balance. Work-life balance is so hard in LA, nearly impossible. But I feel like with most jobs that work-life balance is in ink, and with jobs that are creative and storytelling based, it's in pencil. So even when you're overwhelmed with work, there is some joy in it. And even when you're overwhelmed with life, your work is affecting it. And I think that's the only way to have a work-life balance in a creative field. So I think I ended up in this position because I kind of like let go of the idea of clocking out. And sometimes that breaks me, and burnout happens to me way more often than I feel is healthy. But I'm also net happier more often than I think the average person. So like my extremes are still extreme. I'm either ecstatic or I'm in a
Right.
corner like, oh, what have I done? Why is everything a hobby, my work?
Yeah.
Because I don't have vocations. Like I don't watch movies without being like, how will I talk about this later? I haven't read a comic for fun in 30 years because even when it's for fun, I'll still use it in a conversation with you.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think I could have chosen a job that I left. And I think that was a problem with jobs was I would leave them and be like, why did I waste those 6 hours? If I'm serving tables, I'm experiencing like conversation, but like I'm not getting the benefit of this company doing better. I'm not like they're making all this money and I'm not. So I think from a really young age, I was trying to find the thing that was going to make me my own boss, my own employee. And also when I look back on my legacy, I've caused something. And I think that's because I read comics.
Well, no, I think it's right, but it's not, it's so much more than that, right? You just said something again that's really meaningful. You said joy. And it's funny because I actually spoke with Greg earlier today, and we were talking about feeling content. And I said, I think it's how you define being content. And we talked a lot about work-life balance.
Yeah.
What does that look like? How do you manage it? And I said, I often struggle with work-life balance, but I think I feel very similar to the way you do, where I've done every job you can do. I cleaned houses. I've worked at 7-Eleven. I did whatever you can do. And I've been working in this field for as long as I could work in the not-for-profit world. And I said, the way I try to explain it to people, I said, you're out playing golf or you want to go fishing because you enjoy that. And that's like your extracurricular activity. I love what I do. So when I have free time, I'm exploring programs. I'm looking at, what does a UBI program look like? What is the data? Are those outcomes different? What is high school graduation rates in this particular area? Why are they lower? What's happening when you're not literate by 3rd grade? How can we have kids in a literacy program? And I said, I don't know if it's like a secular thing where I'm giving myself an excuse to work all the time. Like you said, I haven't watched it for fun, but I actually feel happy doing it. So I do think I'm doing it for fun, but I'm not sure about,
and that's the fine line for me.
Yes. It's like, when is there nothing that I'm just doing something else?
And can I be content with nothing ever again? I don't enjoy time off, but at the same time, my body needs it. And then I forget because I'm human. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I am so ill. And like, you've just been working for 4 months straight. You're like, oh, it could be that.
Yes,
but
it might. It might be that, but might not, right?
Certainly. These 4 hours of sleep were perfectly adequate. But I think that's the thing is finding the passion that's so strong that you ignore your physical body. But then that's the danger of.
And then you give yourself like the time off and you're relaxed. And then I say to myself, well, this is why I need to be doing what I'm doing. All right. Like I'm bored now. I'm done. Like, and I'm a very active person. I love nature. I like running and kayaking, and I've lived close to a beach. I walk on the beach. Like there's so much I love. I have chickens. I garden. Like I have all these interesting things in my life. But even when I'm doing them, I'm like, oh, this is great. And I'm trying to be very intentional, and it's a lot, I practice Buddhism a lot. So I'm saying, as I'm doing something, give all of my attention and my mind to this one thing. And so I'll be gardening, trimming, looking at what I'm growing, paying attention. But boy, I have to focus because I'm drifting off to, oh God, I have to remember that I want to put that agenda together because that's going to be a really important meeting. And then I say to myself, well, look, I gardened and I did my chicken. So now I have a right to go do this other thing.
There's never an end to the work. And that's what's so interesting about like the undercurrent of like, okay, there's still 15 things I could do. And so the gardening suddenly becomes a task to get to the 15 things you could do. But that's what's interesting about, I think, these fields is I've known extreme joy and extreme burnout, but I don't think I've felt content since I was a child. Like the word content has not entered my like status. And that is, I think, going to be interesting in like 10 years. Because I think there's a window of like sustainability. And then there's like, how do you find the work-life balance so it's not the highs and lows of the roller coaster of, because when you don't have vocations, when you don't watch movies or read or do any of those things that aren't like that undercurrent, but I'm so happy with it. Like it's all
that's what I'm saying. I'm really happy with it. And I don't know, but I do think of this because Greg asked me, he said, do you think you're content? And I was quick to answer yes. And then I said, well, let me think about that. I think I have a lot of joy in my life. And I think joy is different than happiness. I think joy is internal and I think happiness is external, but I feel like I have a lot of that, but I do remember a time that I truly believe I felt the most content I've ever felt. And I was working in Nepal and staying with a family. I every day would walk like 10 kilometers to this special school for kids that had disabilities. So they either had some sort of a physical disability or a special ed need. And it was on the grounds of an orthopedic hospital. And it was very poor conditions. And I worked with teaching the kids, and then I would walk with them to an orphanage where many of them lived, and some of them would go home. And I had never been around people with so little, with so much joy and content and happiness. And I remember sleeping 8 hours, eating a meal, sitting and watching kids. Now there's no TV, there's no anything. So every night, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I am I'm learning more, that I'm actually teaching them. And I remember sitting on the floor, there's no furniture in this room, and they have bunk beds and whatnot. And a family is who's running this orphanage, and they're lovely. And the dad's a Sherpa, for Mount Everest. It's just a beautiful experience. But every night, the kids were helping them do their homework. When they get done, they put on shows. They like sing, they do little plays or acts, they do magic tricks. And one of the girls said to me, I would love for you to take me back to America with you or to the United States. And I said, to be honest with you, I would do that in a minute if I actually thought you'd be happier.
Yeah.
But the attention, there was something about the attention that kids were getting, or the way that they played a game with rubber bands. They would flip rubber bands and you had to overlap them. And if it was like almost a marbles, but with rubber bands. And I said, I have never seen people with so little. I had a big camera and I would walk the whole trip and all kids would follow me. But every single time I walked by, because there is no diversity in Nepal. So I stood out. And people would say, oh, America, come sit down. And they would give me tea. And they had nothing. These are dirt floors. People are cooking with fire. And I'm sitting down and talking to them. And they're telling me how much joy and happiness they have and how grateful they are that I'm sitting there. And I remember talking to people back home and saying, I've never felt more content. And I think that is the true point of content. The moment you're in is absolutely the only thing that matters.
I think presence is harder and harder to find. I think through a combination of things, through late stage capitalism, through our abundance culture, through overstimulation, through our attention spans, like we're in a perfect storm of discontent and we're in a perfect storm of like losing the present. I wonder if there's either like a pendulum swing or if there's a zeitgeist shit. Like the way the status quo is now, we'll never know that here. But it's beautiful to be able to experience it, to know what you're not feeling. Because I think what you just said about kids, you'll never know what you can't know.
That's right.
And that is the magic moment of like, you got to feel contentment through absolution. And I don't think that we'll get to feel that without that.
No, and I think you won't feel it without intent, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to make sure I try to replicate this, learning lessons, from a young man who was in a wheelchair, and I would see him every morning, and I said to him, he came and he said, oh, I want to have tea with you. And he was beautiful, and he had a brother with him, and he was about 18. And I said, do you mind if I ask what happened? Like, how did you lose the ability to walk? And he said, oh my God, I am so lucky. He said, and I'm so happy because I fell off a roof when I was like 10 and I broke my back. And he said, and you wouldn't believe how wonderful it was to learn how many people loved me. My parents loved me. My brother brings me to school every day. Everybody came to help me when I didn't feel good. Doctors took care of me. And I had no idea how much I was loved. And he was telling me that he's grateful and he's sitting in a wheelchair. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, like I need to rethink this. And I said, when I go home, I'm going to be more present, try to sit and spend that time even with the people you care about or your kids without worrying about what's on your phone.
Yeah.
And I think, can I do that? Maybe 10% of the time. And I'm intentionally trying to do it and create an atmosphere to which I could do it. So I'm wondering, do you think there is a world in which, through exposure to these kinds of conversations that we're having, or saying, what is it, like really trying to find a world that can find content sitting still?
I think that there's a lot of nature.
A superhero named Content, right? A superhero that could be content.
I think there's a lot of nature to it, but I think it's more nurture. And I think that our society is only fueled by want. Like the nature of society is to make us want more. And so if we're always programmed to want, we can't know what it is to not want. And that sounds like bad English, but if everything is like, you want the bigger car, you want the bigger TV, you want the keeping up with the Joneses, plus you want this better food, you want this idea, you want, and then everywhere you walk is stimuli on top of that, and our attention spans being shortened. I don't think there's a way in our society to know contentment as it currently stands. But I think there are strides being made that are really beautiful towards finding that 10%. I see more and more the next generation getting back on flip phones. I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to get them back on a flip phone. I want to have a work phone that's smart and then a dumb phone for me. I think there are people that are raising their kids on 80s and 90s TV. That's me and my fiance's plan, is we're going to raise them with like VHS and less stimulating everything. But I don't want them to not know TV, because I don't want them to be ostracized from their communities. I don't want them to be like, we're the weirdos that don't know TV.
Right.
So finding those middle grounds. But I think slowing down brings you closer to presence. And I think that our society is all about speeding up. So it's finding a way to not alienate yourself and slow down. So you're doing just enough that you feel like you're part of culture and you're part of society, but it's intentionally slowing down. So it's all about intention. But what worries me is that's in 2025 when we're having this conversation. What's 2030 going to look like? Because 2020 was certainly slower. Like it is exponential, and AI is going to make it more exponential. And all of the societal shifts are only driving towards a certain amount of people having even more and a certain rest of us having even less. And that is only going to benefit us speeding up. Like the people that have the power just want us to go faster.
Well, it's true, but you also said something that's really important, which was this generation, right?
Yeah.
There's a generation now, and I can tell this from the workforce, I can tell it from my own kids, who are putting more of a value on a work-life balance and doing meaningful things, right? It was like when I can remember when I was a kid, you worked because you wanted to have spending money, right? You would go and work wherever you'd apply. Your work in the summer, your parents would say, hey, there's a job in town. Go
Yeah.
get a job. And the whole goal was, I'm just going to make money to go out with my friends, go to the movies, have fun. Now, and it's even kids that are working for me, they want to know they're making a difference. They want to know that they're having an impact. They want to know that what they're doing is making somebody's life better. And to that end, I'm wondering if we should be putting more of our effort, right? Thinking about content creation, thinking about doing more content like this, where we're saying, you know, here are folks that you look up to that are engaged in different mediums. And I'm only half kidding about really saying, I wonder if there's a superhero that actually has, that we're starting to, like with the 2-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
You're going to start looking at a superhero that learns lessons about making the things that are really important. And I think this generation of kids that I'm seeing that are coming in at 21, but also up to 30, 31, 32, really want to know, and they have integrity. And they're saying, like, I have to know I have a purpose. I have to know I'm seen, that my voice is heard, that my ideas are meaningful.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a world where I have a boss. I can't leave work until he leaves work. I'm meant to do it. If he's, I can't be working less than he works.
Yeah.
But here is a whole generation of kids. I'm wondering if we shouldn't just be investing so much in saying, you care, you want to give back, you want to be impactful, you want to be meaningful. How can we support you? How can we help do that?
I definitely think like Gen Z and Gen Alpha have so much more potential because of their exposure. I think that's one of the, I mean, I've spoken very ill of technology, but I think there is a lot of that technology that's giving them exposure to way more data than we ever could have. Like, we grew up needing an encyclopedia to get what they get into Google, and they're getting that exponentially too. So I think there is a beautiful thing happening where they're seeing the negative effects in real time.
Yes.
I think I'm of a generation that was in a really tricky spot. Like I was born in '88. So I'm in that weird micro generation of pre-internet and post-internet. So I remember researching with a book, but I didn't have to for long. Whereas they, I think, are very aware of the dangers of the rapid amount of data that can come out at them at all times, but they're getting that through this exposure. So I think there'll be a time when the rebellion for our generation was a lot of that, like, we're told that we need to work, so we're not going to work, flip a table. I think their rebellion is going to be like, we're told that we need to consume. Maybe we don't.
That's right.
And I think that's the
exactly
beautiful thing
it.
to come. And whether that consumption is of data, of an overabundance of tech, consuming, buying on Amazon, I think there is a rebellion that's going to be very interesting back to nature. But I just hope it is at a point where it can cause a shift early enough that they're not a minority group. I hope they're not like 5% of us realized trees are good.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
yes.
Like, I hope it
So we have a
happens in time.
Lorax. We're dealing with the Lorax.
Because right
Yeah.
now it's even like discussing like, you know, the hippie movement and how counter-military that was. Like they were always like othered. And I don't want this Generation Z or Alpha or whoever to feel like them not being consumers is like othering. And that's my only concern for that generation.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you. I think that's part of this. I mean, first, thank you for joining us on Make an Impact. I do think being able to look at how storytelling, content creating, and then having access, because what you, Real Rejects, the folks I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of speaking to today can do is speak to masses of people. And I think there's a reason people are connecting to you. They're connecting to Aaron, they're connecting to Greg, is because they see something in each of you that they see in themselves. And so I'm looking forward to how we're doing more like this, doing more like Real Rejects diaries.
Yeah.
And Making Impact can actually help shape the folks that are on now, and that we can get the messaging that we're talking about out there to say, learn from what we're not doing, or at least we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And they're learning on it on their own. So thank you for joining us. I look forward to doing this again soon. It's always great to see you.
Absolute
Your
pleasure.
joy, your energy, all the good stuff going on in your life. I'm so grateful for it. Thank you for joining Making Impact. Like, subscribe, and hit notifications so you know what's going on. If you like what you heard, or you have your favorite superhero, something you want to talk about, put it in the comments so that we get to see what you're thinking. And honestly, I'd love to do a little contest. Create a superhero that focuses a little bit on content, intentionality, and taking the time to do the things that matter the most. Thank you, and keep watching.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Making Impact, and I hope it makes an impact on you, you lovelies. And let me know what you think in the comments below.